jobs, and more. And what better way to deliberate on this than to hear from the moderators of each Hubli Huddles of the day? To lead this conversation, I would like to invite Mr. Manish Jaiswal, CEO of Deshpande Startups, on the stage. I request Manish to take it forward.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. How many of you at least had today one-on-one meeting? By show of hands. Oh, wow. How many of you had two? Three? Oh, these many three. So you are the people who extracted the maximum value out of today's conference. I mean, that is what it was intended towards. And how many of you attended one of the Hubli huddles at least? At least one Hubli huddle. Okay, interesting. So, idea is, in today's evening spectacle, we will get the chairs of each of the Hubli huddle on the stage and talk to them about what transpired in those Hubli huddles, what came out as an insight. I mean, that's the whole purpose. So, put your hands together as I bring one by one each of the moderators and the chairs. So, Hanisha Vaswani, today I'll not tell you as partner for majority, but somebody who chaired the Hubli huddle for opportunities in Bharat, a myth or a reality. Yeah. Rachit, art of raising funds for entrepreneurs in Bharat. And our own Deshpande, who thought of bridging the gap between North Karnataka entrepreneurs and bridging them to the successful entrepreneurs. Welcome, panelists. So we'll start with you, Hanisha. So what's the verdict? Opportunities in Bharat are a reality or a myth?
No, absolute reality. It was, see, we started out by saying, okay, there is this dichotomy on the assumptions that we are making around the size of the opportunity in Bharat. Everybody instinctively knows that there is a lot of money in rural and small town India, but the closed myth is that startups have not been able to tap into it. So we went into it with some sort of overall numbers. So Madan Padaki got us rolling with the with the numbers that literally Mandya's GDP is $1 billion plus. So and growing significantly, it has doubled since 2017. So, things like that got us rolling a little bit. And then the fact that, people like Namayatri have actually been able to capitalize that. So they're able to drive 3,000 transactions a day from a town the size of Tumkur. So definitely reality, but we can deep dive into it later.
I was talking to Namayatri and they're telling that they are almost 65% of India's ONDC. So that's a big direction that India's opportunity, the Bharat's opportunity or India 2 opportunities are quite real. What insight came out of your discussion? If I were to ask you to summarize, how can one really look to tap into the opportunities of Bharat?
I think the biggest insight was that the go-to-market strategies will look different. It does seem to be a reality that it's a more patient game, because the customer in rural and small town India seems to require a lot more trust building. So it's a longer term relationship building kind of sale as opposed to being more transactional. Somebody in urban India seems to be more transactional. They could go try out a Zepto or something like that without thinking about it too much. Whereas with especially also the nature of the problems that are being solved across the since most of them seem to be B2B problems, they also require very deep customer connects, long-term trust building before you can land the first sale. So I think one of the concerns that we left the room with was what should we do as support organizations to support the entrepreneurs in the journey before they hit first sale. So what can we do that?
Interesting. And let's say if we have locked into that opportunity is real. Now next thing we need is the fuel, right? Yeah. The money. So Rachit, if I were to ask you, raising money for startups focused on Bharat, Is that an art or a science?
I think, look, early stage funding is always an art more than a science, right? You have to convince your early stage investors before you have a lot of data and proof points on one, that the opportunity is large, and two, that you have the vision and you have the ability to hire the right people to like really make it work within that opportunity set, right? So that's definitely more of an art than a science, especially on the early stage side. As you get larger and as you grow, then obviously it's definitely more numbers driven. But when you're starting out, it is definitely more an art than a science.
And from the Hubli Huddle, if you could share just few tidbits that will increase the odds of raising capital for Bharat startups.
Yeah, I think we shared it during the discussion also. I think a few things. One is, I think the capital is available. That's the good part. I think most investors are convinced of the opportunity in Bharat. Maybe I'll ask a question, right, for the audience or for the panelists here. I mean, guess what percentage of Flipkart or Meesho orders are tier 3 plus, right? It's I don't know. Anyone wants to guess?
Does anyone want to guess? Yeah. You can shout your answer from there.
Yeah, it's like 50-60% of orders, right? So I think one is the opportunity is there. We're talking about 30-40 billion in GMV altogether. Of that, 50% is already sort of quote unquote Bharat. So one is the opportunities there, people are convinced. Two is a lot of the infrastructural rails have been laid, right? Payments, bank accounts, internet connectivity, all of that. So I think investors are convinced of the opportunity. There's a lot of investment happening. You can look around and see our portfolio at Axel or others, and you'll see enough companies that have been funded in the category. So I think there's enough money. So coming to your question was more in terms of how to raise, right? Like what are the things that people should focus on? I think one thing that we've seen, and I mentioned this during the huddle also, which is a lot of the people who are looking at Bharat first talk about like the social impact angle, then the commercial angle. I think we have to realize that to create impact, let's talk more on commercials, like talk really about like how do you make it a high quality business. Then it doesn't matter if it's Bharat or not Bharat. If it's a good business, it's a good business. And that's how I think people should really focus on that, right? Like why there's an untapped opportunity, what will make it a high quality business. And then from the VC point of view, what's also important is that how can it scale non-linearly? Is there a differentiation in the model that will allow you to scale non-linearly? And I think it's very important for entrepreneurs to articulate that and convince investors about that.
Thank you. Desh, your take on that. What can an entrepreneur do to raise their odds of raising capital?
Well, our huddle was supposed to be something to help these people, but all the companies were doing extraordinarily well. They were all growing 3 times every year, right? And one of them was going from 60 million 3x. So it was a beautiful story to hear from all of them. There was only one entrepreneur who had an Indian customer base, but rest of the people on the table, they all had US customers. Which is very unorthodox. Usually you always say, because establishing a sales channel in US is very, very expensive, you always say, hey, first make sure that you establish your base in India, except for the service business, which is very different. Establish your base here, get your customer base, get your balance sheet, and then you go outside. But all these people had somehow found customers outside of India, and it was nice. But there were still a couple of them were still struggling with access to capital. But they're still thinking of credit. And credit isn't easily available for startups. And I know one gentleman pointed out that there is a venture debt coming to India now, just like in the US. And if venture debt comes to India, that I think will help these people quite a bit.
All these North Karnataka entrepreneurs were not new to you. Each of these entrepreneurs you have met over the last 10, 15 years. Was there still something new that you came across when you met them today? Was something out of the box that hit you today?
Well, these high growth entrepreneurs were not really looking at a very restricted rural markets. They were looking at slightly bigger markets. So I think it's one of the two things. Either you bootstrap and and look for rural markets, and there's nothing wrong in it, and you can build a very stable, sustainable business. But it's hard to find a high margin, high growth business with people who don't have money, right? I mean, they can't really afford to pay that much. But most of the people at our table were mostly B2B businesses.
So looks like the common theme, if I'm able to pick between each of the Hubli huddle, is that even if you're solving for Bharat, it has to have its own legs. It has to have its own potential to attract capital. It has to have its own potential to withstand the ups and downs of the business and still be able to tap into the opportunity that there exist. And the approach has to be a lot more nuanced and not the one that one can apply in urban cities. I mean, that's what I understand from here. So can I go into the two chairs that also did the workshop today? And I want to ask what insight came out of the two workshops. So first, let me go to Archana Datta. Archana, you did an art of presentation, a workshop. What was the outcome of that workshop? What came out of it? If you can have mic pass to Archana, please.
All right, so while every room was talking about $1 billion, I think the art of presentation was more about knowing your purpose. And a lot of founders said, oh, we thought you were going to tell us how to do the pitch deck. And I said, first you work on the deck that this really belongs to, figure out why you're here, what you're doing, why does it really matter, and to whom it matters. And I think everything else revolves around it. And we know money is a consequence of everything that we are putting together. And I told them that founders are like magicians, right? We have literally like a magic wand, and we can make things happen. So I think it was a bit of more vulnerability, more sensibility, more humanity kind of thing to everything that founders have to do. So it was beautiful from that perspective. At least I thought there were lots of questions, a lot of relatability. And there was less of dollar in the room, I would say. So I think that it was
wonderful. Thank you for your comments. Well, Archana's session was very magical. I think there's so many questions that are pouring in. By the time I wanted to do the felicitation, I was asked to wait for 10 minutes. Next mic, if you could have for Digvijay. Digvijay took a session on the well-being of founders, which is like the silent co-founder in the co-founding team. You know, we always think there are two co-founders, but the well-being of the co-founder is also another co-founder that we always ignore. So your insights from the workshop.
So one of the things that we confirmed in the session is there's a challenge in the startup ecosystem around raising funds we talked about. There's one challenge which is even more prevalent is stress. So because startups need to handle, the founders need to handle so many different things. They're struggling not just with funding but so many other things, including not just financial commitments and meeting those, but also time with family and just avoiding burnout. So with that context, we made it quite interactive, and what came about is though stress is common in everyone and everywhere, the reasons for the stress are very different, could be different. So just taking like a standard template of how do you fix the challenges around stress was something which would not really work. So, but just like for startups, though we have different startups, we have like a business model canvas that can give you a framework to think. So we looked at a framework for the spiritual version of this BMC would be body, mind, consciousness. So we looked at those aspects, and what we did was also to make it more experiential, because a lot of the theory, most of the people, all of the people I would say in this room are very intelligent and they have great ideas. So they already have a certain level of accomplishment in one side of the brain, which is the left side probably in most cases. But often what happens is they don't know how to balance it. So gave them a framework for how to deal with all the 7 levels of existence: body, mind, body, breath, mind, intellect, memory, ego, and how to nurture your spirit. So we had a session where they got to experience that over 15-20 minutes, So we did a POC, we did a BMC, we did a proof of concept, and then we said the PMF is yet to be done, which is practice makes perfect. So they're going to go and practice this in their lives going forward.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Very well put. And Digvijay always says that the last thing at any workshop is go back and practice. Right? It's never the conclusion. It's about how you go back and practice. Let me come back to my panelists and just ask them one last question. Rachit will start from you. The theme of this conference was how to build a founder-first ecosystem for Bharat. We believe that the ecosystem has to be focused on the founder and not really the startup. Because when you focus on the founder, you're also seeding for a possible angel investor, a possible mentor, so on and so forth. The many more roles the same founder can go on to take. It's very important to be focused. Now, what can we as an ecosystem do? Just one thing if you were to tell that will help us get one step closer.
To being a founder first, sorry, just the question again?
Yeah, so for Bharat, we have a unique opportunity to build something from scratch, right? And as you all said that, look, the capital has to be looked differently, the approach to market has to be looked differently, the problem statement have to be looked differently. So we are building this ecosystem. Now, we have to keep founders at the center of it. Then only it's founder first ecosystem. And I think well-being for founders was one approach through which we said, if we talk about the well-being now, we are creating founders at the center. What more could we do from your perspective?
I think, look, I think every company, at the end of the day, it boils down to the founder, right? I was talking to some folks earlier, which is that whether you invest in seed, series A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever it is, finally, great companies are driven by great founders. So absolutely, founders have to be at the center of it at any stage of a great company. I think the main thing that we can do for founders is, as an ecosystem, we also have to be more sort of forgiving also, right? Like in terms of risk, so that will allow people to take risk, do new models, right? Like earlier, I think in India, a lot of times for even investors, like the idea was just to fund copies of Western models coming to India. To your point, you have to recreate things from grounds up because there's no, Chinese or Western model that will be there in India. I think overall, I think we have to be forgiving, like give space to take risk, failure, and it's okay. And only then we will keep going forward as an ecosystem if we really want to do something different.
Very interesting. Thank you. I'll save the dessert for the last. They shall come to you last. But how about Hanisha? You go first. Same question. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. My approach is. I'm still not getting this right. My approach would be to understand that the founder has a second center also, in the sense that they have other people that they are the center of another ecosystem, if you want to call it that. Their family and friends. There's a peer group that they are constantly measuring themselves against. They have a peer group that they are being measured against. So so this comes from speaking to a lot of founders informally and then hearing stories like, when I started out, my parents didn't talk to me for 2 years, saying, we don't know what you're doing. Or, somebody asking, the parent constantly checking with other peers saying, do you understand what they're doing? Do you think they're doing the right thing? So, there is a lot of that. So, I don't know if there is a broader approach that requires. So, a lot of people, for instance, reported like that ecosystem becoming a lot kinder to them the moment Shark Tank aired. That, okay, now I understand somewhat what you're doing and that you're not the only person in it. So, giving somehow the family a sense of the fact that these people are on to something tough, support them. If they fail, it's not a fail. If it's not failure forever. And so, we tried this when I was in the UN at a very small scale when we were running a program for micro entrepreneurs, female micro entrepreneurs called She Can in Egypt, where we also had a session for the husbands of women. So the way we selected who can be a part of this program, for instance, was basically that we selected the mothers of children who had a great attendance in school. We basically said, okay, someone who cares enough about the family to do well will basically someone who's caring enough about the growth of the family and sending the child to school will probably also be a great candidate for a microfinance loan. Now, if we are taking them through a training program, they also exist in a bigger ecosystem, right? So how do you also ensure that, okay, the family is on board and all that? I think there is an angle there.
It cannot get concluded better than that. So the final question that I want to ask Desh before we move out, or rather move out, is that Desh, Hubli or Boston?
Right now it's Hubli because Boston is minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay. Philanthropy or entrepreneurship?
There's no difference.
Sycamore or Deshpande Foundation?
They both have their own problems.
You had to pick one, Desh. Well, thank you, panelists. And we can probably take one or two questions from the audience, if there are any. Yeah, we can have the mic pass to places where the questions are coming from. Yeah, there's one already, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Anil Chauhan.
Ask the question and tell which panelist you want the question to be responded by.
Yeah, this person, sorry.
Rachit Parekh.
Yeah. In most of the times, whenever I have interacted with the investor, they'll be like, it's early time for us to invest. So what do they actually mean when they say it's very early for us?
Most of the time, they have some other reason to pass, but they're just too polite to say that. But no, look, I think first of all, it depends from fund to fund, right? Like for a lot of funds, it is genuinely too early. They only invest larger check amounts, or their minimum ticket size may be much more than you can absorb at that point of time. And they want to see more proof points in terms of like, are you closer to product market fit or not? Sometimes for funds, I would urge you to ask them, right? When they give you an answer saying it's too early, you should ask them that what proof points do you want to see for it to not be early, right? Like I think it's very, very case by case, to be honest, right? For many funds, it would be that you need to get to product market fit before they can invest. For some funds, they would want to see more customers and repeatable sales motion before they can invest. So I think it's very varied and depends case by case.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I think investors that I've seen, some people like Rachit may be more thoughtful, but they're essentially in the business of pattern recognition.
Yeah, absolutely.
So usually what happens is when you speak to them, in the first 30 seconds they've made up their mind. Okay. Either they're going to fund you or not fund you.
Okay.
And so then they'll find some excuse. Either you're too big, too small, too fat, too thin, something or the other, too early, too late. So I think you just have to make sure that you get to tell your story very quickly and grab their attention. And also don't pitch it to just one person. You know, keep trying multiple people.
Definitely. But why don't they just, let us know the areas where we lack and where we have to improvise? That would definitely help us, right? So simply they just deny politely, that doesn't help us in any way. Yeah, so
I think you have to ask. Look, I think just to give a sense of number of companies that every investor will meet, right? I think in any given year, just in our Bangalore office, we probably meet upwards of 8 to 10,000 startups a year.
Okay.
And we fund maybe 20 to 25. So the ratio is literally that much. So you sometimes for someone to go down into the details, give you a very precise answer, and nobody wants to give you a half-baked answer, so they want to think about it carefully. So I think sometimes you have to ask to extract that information. You have to figure out how to extract that information.
Thank you.
And in many cases, they don't know.
Yeah, in many cases they don't know.
Because it's really a gut feel kind of a business.
Especially in the early stages.
Yeah.
No, but one technique to break out of the too early for us is put them on your mailing list and send them a monthly update. Someday you will be not too early for them. So that's another way to sort of break the clutter.
The other way is to say, what do you need to see? At least then you'll come out of the meeting with a clear action item for yourself to achieve that next thing. Maybe they'll say, why don't you hit 10 crore revenue or whatever. Why don't you find 20 customers? Okay, so now you can go out, get 20 customers and go back to it, right?
Yeah. So whatever you suggested, sir, the same question again I had asked for an investor from Kalari Capital, POD World. These guys were there in HDB Blue, the event which happened few days before. So I asked them directly whether the revenue is less or the number of orders are less, or the technology you want me to, we are a bootstrap and completely operating offline. So I did not find any answer for those questions. So I was just wondering what is wrong happening.
Yeah, There may be many cases why they may not have been able to give you one precise answer. I think what they said is that you talk to too many people. Somebody will give you the right direction. I think putting your hope on just one person is too much to ask for. And sometimes you can ask the same person 3 times and not get an answer. That is also a usual use case as well. So I think talking to too many people and actually figuring out who's the right person to partner with you would be the model to go for. We can have the next question. Yeah.
A lot of it is like marriage matchmaking. When somebody doesn't want to give their daughter or son whatever, they'll come up with some reason. It's never the right reason. So.
Amazing.
Yeah, so this question is for Desh. So we today heard, in the Hubli huddle that there are going to be a lot of incubators coming up in India. Lot of incubators going to come up in India, and Deshpande Startups has been there for almost 9-10 years, and you have been very successful in making very successful startups come out of this incubation center. So with so many new incubation centers coming up, do you see a need for them to have a mentor? Because we are talking about startups having mentors, but now with so many incubation centers coming up, is there a need for these incubation centers to have mentor incubation centers also? Because at the end of the day, many startups are going to them and they are going to go through the whole process. So that's my question to you, Desh.
Yeah, most of the incubators are probably non-profit, right, in some ways. So they have a mission. And so it's not really market share. So they're more likely to, that's something that in India we have to learn how to do. We don't do a very good job of collaborating, exchanging ideas and so on. And it's only when you come together and learn from each other that both get better. For example, in US, I've been on the board of MIT for the last 25 years. MIT competes extremely hard with Stanford. For students, for faculties, for professors, everything else, it's always like arch enemies. But every time there is a review committee for some department or some activity in MIT, there's always some dean or somebody from Stanford who is a part of that committee. And when they come there, they're very open. So I think competing and cooperating is what makes these organizations very strong. And India is just learning to do it. Usually, even startups here, they feel like they have this secret sauce, and if they open their mouth, it's all gone, right? Usually, making anything work in life is very hard. And so the secret is not sort of one little secret recipe, but being able to work on it day in and day out. And so I think that's a great idea. I think there should be meetings for incubator leaders to come together and share the best practices.
Thank you. Maybe one more question. Yes.
Hello. So this is to both Manish and Desh. What next for Deshpande Startups at Deshpande Foundation? Is there a fund in line? Is there anything much more broader that you're looking at? How to really, maybe the mentoring one that you're talking about, right? Is there a next milestone that you're looking for?
Well, Bharat is a very, very large opportunity. I think today we had Vivek also tell India too is very, very large. And the fund itself is $50 million for him, and I'm sure there will be many more that will follow the suit. It's such a large opportunity. Where we are headed is that over the last decade and a half, we have built enough insights and network into the agri community, the micro-entrepreneurship community, the skilling, the government schools, and so on and so forth. What it has done is given us a strategic advantage to really understand the pulse of these ecosystems. So what we want to now do is focus ourselves very strongly on these sectors within Bharat and go after them. So any entrepreneur who wants to operate out of education, skilling, edu-skilling, skill tech, agri-tech, food, and within that, go down, seed tech, biochemistry, so on and so forth. This can go on and listing. So very, very niche sector, if we start focusing on, we can unlock value. I think time and again, we have been told that startups needs to operate on niche, and that niche should unlock economic value, should have a large market, only then they can compete. If the opportunity is very big and too complex to solve, then big players will be there, they will burn the cash and make sure that they have that opportunity. So startups, the only way they can tap into that opportunity is they figure out a niche that others can't. And then through that inroad, they make a big opportunity available to themselves. So I think that's a mantra that we also want to incorporate, because when you work with entrepreneurs, the rub-off effect does happen. So we also have started to think like that. I think that's where the direction of Deshpande startups is headed. Yeah, Desh, if you want to add something.
No, I think that's right. In a lot of ways, the game is just starting. It's taken all these decade and a half that Manish talked about, mostly just to seed the idea of entrepreneurship. 15 years ago, nobody would have even heard about the word entrepreneurship, right? And now at least they've heard about it. But we don't really have those many large companies that have come out of the foundation yet, or large or small, or things that are really the way they should be, right? So, but it takes generations. Same thing happened in US. In US, in 80s, when I was starting my first company, there was no venture capital. The largest venture capital would be like $5 million. So before they gave you a check for $1 million, they made sure that you were off the payroll at least for 1 year. You had mortgaged your wife, your kids. The whole idea was that if ever you fail, you had to hurt a lot more than they hurt, right? And so it takes time for that whole process to evolve and develop. And when the entrepreneurs become very predictably successful, then the professional money starts coming in, right? Because then they can put money and they can get more out of it, and they can put even more money. And so I think it's a process. And unfortunately, you can't speed it up. It takes time. But I'm glad that it's making progress. And I think so Manish has his job cut out.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. All the rest of the questions we can probably take offline. Thank you, panelists, and thank you for such a captive audience.
I would request Desh to stay back on the stage. I would also request Mr. Santosh Kumar, Director at WiseTech, SPJ IMR, to join Desh on the stage. And now, the moment we have all been waiting for, the winners of Pitchathon 2025. Throughout the day, we have seen incredible startups, incredible elevator pitches, tackling unique challenges with their remarkable solutions. Cutting through this fierce competition, we do have winners. The runner-up team for Pitchathon 2025 is Palmerwell. I request Palmerwell team to come on the dais. Let's give a huge round of applause, guys.
If we get more sponsors, we can solve all the access to capital.
And now, the title winners of Pitchathon 2025. Any guesses, guys? Any guesses? Okay. The winner is RC Labs. A huge round of applause to the winners of Pitchathon 2025. you, Desh, and thank you, Santosh. We want to thank all the teams who participated today for sharing their incredible ideas and dedication. A huge shout out to our esteemed panel of judges of Pitchathon 2025 with their valuable insights and decisions. As we reach the end of Startup Dialogue 2025, I would like to take a moment and thank everyone involved in making this event successful. We are deeply grateful to SPJ IMR, Wise Tech Startup Hub, and NanoPix for the generous gold and silver sponsorship, respectively. A special thanks to RBL Bank, our banking partner, for the event for their invaluable contributions that played a vital role in making this event successful. Before we wind up, I would request Team Deshpande Startups to stand up wherever they are. A big thank you to the organizing committee for their tireless efforts in putting this conference together. Last but not the least, it's truly an honor to see such a dedicated audience engaged here today. Your presence has contributed immensely to the event's success. We truly appreciate your support. We highly value your feedback as we reflect upon the event going forward. And for that, we request you to scan the QR codes on the back of your tag and find a feedback link or a feedback form which you can fill before you exit the hall. Thank you, and looking forward to hosting you all again next year at Startup Dialogue 2026. Enjoy the rest of the evening.